Welcome to another episode of TRVC, the Turkish VC podcast. Today I have as guest Aslı Kurul Türkmen. Aslı is the head of Endeavor Turkey. Endeavor has played a key role in the development of the Turkish startup ecosystem. So I'm very excited to have Aslı with us today. Welcome, Aslı.
Hi, very nice to be here. Thank you.
So how did you come to be involved in the Turkish startup ecosystem? And then also, what's the story of Endeavor and both worldwide and in Turkey?
Sure. So my story, I was born in Istanbul. I was here until I graduated from high school. Then I went to America for college. I was there for 10 years. So I did college. Then I did 1 year in finance. Then I did my master's. I moved towards, my master's was in social psychology. So organizational psychology. My undergrad was in economics. So it was a kind of a shift. And then this was Chicago, New York. I moved back to Chicago, then started working at a consulting firm doing organization effectiveness, like management consulting. We were, working with very large scale companies, doing lots of like people related stuff. Then I moved to Turkey in 2006 when everybody was moving to Turkey.
Yep.
And,
I moved in 2007. There was a wave.
It was a huge wave.
Yep.
I mean, I part of my move was because like I fell in love with my current husband, so that like sped things up. But it was also that was the time to move back. Like everybody was moving back.
I saw a statistic that in 2006, Turkey got the same amount of FDI as the previous 10 years combined.
I'm not surprised.
So there was kind of a...
That was the year, or around the years when we were on the cover of, Istanbul was on the cover of Time Out, saying like the coolest new city in Europe, like everybody's having a great time. So I moved back, then I started again to work in a consulting firm, doing pretty much the same thing I was doing. And Endeavor was just starting. So Didem
Altap, who is GP of Trio VC, which we didn't have Didem on the podcast, but we had Mine Dedekoca, who's a venture partner for Trio VC.
So Didem started Endeavor with an amazing board at the end of 2006. And by chance, the part of the starting team were my friends from college, high school, etc. And they knew that I was looking for something. I had no idea about entrepreneurship. This was, we didn't speak about things like that really here at that time. And so towards the end of like 2008, beginning of 2009, I got interested in what they were doing. And I said, this looks like a really cool organization. And I joined. So kind of rest is kind of history for my career. Like it was always at Endeavor. And
so you joined first working with Didem and
I was an analyst in what we called entrepreneur selection team. And so Didem and I worked very closely for many, many years. And then when she was ready to move on, we made the switch. This was 5 years ago, I think. And the pandemic kind of screwed up my concept of time. And Endeavor is a global organization. It was first founded in 1997 by a woman named Linda Rottenberg, who still runs the organization today. Linda is an American, but she had moved to Latin America as an Ashoka Fellow. So Ashoka is a social entrepreneurship organization. They do great things. They have an office in Istanbul as well. So for anybody who's interested in social entrepreneurship, they're an amazing organization. And Linda was an Ashoka Fellow in Latin America, and she realized there was an opportunity there for entrepreneurship, like scale-up entrepreneurship. And societal structure created some impediments to entrepreneurship, like access to networks, access to money, access to customers. So it was very much like, big families, holding companies, etc. So she launched Endeavor in Argentina and Chile. And she has an amazing book and she tells the stories everywhere. So please look it up. It's an amazing story.
What's the title of the book?
If you're not called crazy, you're doing something wrong or something like that. I have to look it up.
We'll put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments. And so it started like a very loose sort of community, and where they were bringing business people together with entrepreneurs. And our first entrepreneur is out of Argentina, and he ended up being an amazing success. Wences Casares, who's still an active entrepreneur today in the Web3 crypto space. And so it really took off in Latin America. And in 10 years, so in 2006, after South Africa, Istanbul was the first office really out of that geography. And we owe this to, Didem and the founding board members. Some of them knew Linda from WEF and places like that. So it really came together at an amazing time for Turkey. And And it was like the very sweet spot, because when we enter a country, we want there to be some ecosystem, but not too developed, so that they still need Endeavor, and that it's, we can actually like remove some barriers, and but we need an enthusiastic board and entrepreneurs that are coming into the pipeline. And our first entrepreneur was your last guest at your podcast, Bülent Çelebi. Airties was our first entrepreneur before the office was even started. And so in the past, we're now in our 17th year, and this is a world that moves very fast. So when we started, we were supporting Turkish entrepreneurs living in Turkey, mostly doing businesses in Turkey. It was,
That's just how it worked out, or that was kind of the mission, was doing business in Turkey?
That was what people were doing.
Right,
people weren't really doing, global software startups or anything like that. So our first startups ended up doing amazing. So Airties, and then our next cohort had Yemek Sepeti, Positron team, Fırat and Fatih, İşbecer, and then a couple others as well, who really were the starting seeds of this ecosystem. And they've all become angel investors now as well. There's the cycle happening. Which is really what we're after anyway. So this is a nonprofit, by the way. So why are we doing all this? The idea that what we believe is what spurs development is entrepreneurship. So it's when a small company gets bigger, that's how you add the jobs, the wealth, the activity, the energy. And this paradigm of growing entrepreneurs, scaling companies is super important to our ethos. But what's really important is when these entrepreneurs become successful, like Bülent Çelebi, like Nevzat, Melih from Yemek Sepeti, Fırat and Fatih from Positron, we need them to stay in the ecosystem and be the catalyzers for the next generation. So we track these and we create little bubble maps for people. So we look at how many people have left Yemek Sepeti to start their own companies, and Nevzat and Melih investing in these people, mentoring them. So their footprint is so much bigger than, there's a lot of money obviously that gets made from an exit, and they're very Silicon Valley minded. They share it with their employees, but the value created is actually much, much, much bigger than that in years to come. Because
sometimes called the spillover effect, right?
Exactly. And it's not a great word, but the mafias like PayPal mafia, etc. So now in Istanbul, in Turkey, we have the Yemek Sepeti mafia, the Positron mafia. Insider mafia is growing. 34 companies came out of Insider.
Wow.
It's
and Insider hasn't even exited yet, right?
Yeah. So so when you look at the sort of like the generational character of these companies, the first ones, a lot of commerce, a lot of local software. So Positron led the wave of mobile. Yemek Sepeti led the wave of anything like commerce, digitalization, and now we started getting the fintech companies. Now we're led by Insider, kind of. This new wave is really boundaryless, borderless. So as Endeavor, now we're looking at Turkish founders all over the world, not just living in Turkey.
Okay, interesting.
So the diaspora is a big component of what we do as well.
Interesting. So, and can you talk a little bit, maybe useful to cover what the specific programs that you do as Ever? What do you do to help foster the ecosystem? So our main job is to select and support Endeavor entrepreneurs. So Endeavor entrepreneurs are selected through an international process, and it's actually quite a rigorous process. And when you become an Endeavor entrepreneur, then this global mentorship network, the fund, Endeavor Catalyst, which we can talk about in a little bit, and all of our Endeavor offices basically start working for you. And is there, how many Endeavor entrepreneurs is it? You choose every year, or it's kind of...
In 17 years, we've selected 80 plus Endeavor entrepreneurs.
Total of 80 over 17 years. So it's very selective.
It's very selective. And most of them have gone to make some kind of an exit. Some of them, of course, went, out of business. And then about half of them, 40 of them, we still actively support. And
so once an Endeavor entrepreneur, always absolutely. An Endeavor entrepreneur.
One of the things we love is when an Endeavor entrepreneur starts a new company. Because the second time is, I mean, these entrepreneurs have seen everything. So
Right.
the second time, they're so well prepared. They're well funded. They know what they're doing. They're able to create an outstanding team from day one. So for the ones that are motivated, we really support and help the second companies as well.
So you support them and you tie them into your global network of
Exactly.
mentors.
Yes.
And then, so you mentioned Endeavor Catalyst, which is a fund, right?
It's a fund. It's a co-investment fund.
Okay.
Right now, it's got 500 million AUM. We're in the process of raising our fifth fund, which is going to be about $300 to $350 million. It's a global fund.
Okay. So 500 million is the total of the first four funds, or
Yes,
it's
the total of the first four funds. So the idea for Endeavor Catalyst started when Reid Hoffman joined our board in end of 2000s. And one of the challenges, of course, of any NGO is sustainability. With Reid, we got this, amazing VC and equity perspective. So our challenge was, how can we tie our sustainability to the success of our entrepreneurs? And the cleanest way to do this is to get equity at market terms,
Right.
So, and since we select entrepreneurs at quite a later stage, we're not like a accelerator where we're like, you give us 2% for,
Right,
this
okay.
office space and this and that. Like we don't, that doesn't work for us.
So let's just take a little parentheses on that. So you don't choose particularly early stage.
No.
Is there like a particular, is that just how it happens to work out, or is there a particular, sweet spot there of, we look for companies that have this much revenue?
Or
Or
also moves with the ecosystem. Some of the companies we selected back in the day wouldn't be selected right now in this ecosystem. They would just be they would be told you're too early. So come back when you've raised your Series A maybe, because now in all of the Endeavor ecosystems, the funding rounds are larger, companies are exiting for larger exits. So what growth means keeps getting bigger and bigger. So right now, I would say our sweet spot is maybe just before Series A, $5 million ARR. But if we're talking, about like SaaS-y kind of businesses, and we are now talking how we have to switch or tweak our model to fit the AI world, because in the AI world, you get companies raising so much so fast.
Right.
And before you blink and they've raised another round, and it's already now up to $100 million.
Right.
And so we're trying to also become faster and agile to understand this new world where things happen a lot quicker.
But so Catalyst invest, so not like an accelerator. You wouldn't be fair to take 2% of, because they're not that early stage.
Exactly.
But instead, let's invest.
So first they get selected, and then when an Endeavor entrepreneur is raising a $5 million or more round, we co-invest with the lead investor. If everybody's okay with it, there has to be room in the round. One of the biggest question marks when Endeavor Catalyst was starting was, okay, we choose these amazing companies. Will we be able to get into these rounds? So that was one of the things that we were testing, because they're oversubscribed rounds usually. And so that really depends on sort of like your relationship with the entrepreneur, how much value are you able to add? And if there's a strong relationship and a strong added value, then the entrepreneur will fight for you to get you on that cap table. So what Catalyst does is once you're selecting an Endeavor entrepreneur and you're raising $5 million or more, we co-invest with the lead investor up to 10% of the round, or $3 million is our maximum. I think they just changed it from 2. And we go in and come out with the lead investor. We don't sit on the boards. We don't, we abstain from votes, and we always position ourselves sort of with the entrepreneur. And a lot of times, when things are going well, this is a very easy relationship to manage between the investor and the entrepreneur. But when things get dicey, we also a lot of times find ourselves sort of being in the room and trying to help the two sides, trying to help the investors.
You have kind of the two hats.
Exactly.
You're both supporting the entrepreneur as a nonprofit, and you're also an investor, so you can kind of bridge the two sides.
And our aim is, we also have, because we co-invest with the best funds in the world, and we have an investor network. So our main job, so we take the equity, but our main job is still support. So we're supporting with the round, we're supporting with market expansion. So the other day, Serhat from Insider, he was saying the relationships Insider was able to form through Endeavor with different markets and customers, etc., make up a very significant portion of the ARR. Because whenever an Endeavor entrepreneur is expanding into a new market, we hope that their first call is to the Endeavor office because that's their second home there, So a lot of the times we're...
And how many countries is Endeavor present in? 40 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
all continents pretty much?
So we don't have China and India and Russia. But other than that, we're in almost every big market. And in America, we have our headquarters, which is our global staff that works with us to help ship run, and they do a lot of global mentorships, etc. And then we have city offices or regional offices, let's say, Miami, Louisville, Northwest Arkansas, upstate New York, etc., which is sort of the rest of the United States, because the United States also has the same problem where you have a lot of venture capital on the coasts, but not really in the center, etc. So we have both offices like us where they're selecting American entrepreneurs, and then we have our colleagues who are helping the whole ecosystem. And then we have an office, we have a hub in London and a hub in Singapore as well. Okay. These are countries where we don't have field offices per se, but they are big hubs for the ecosystem for investors. And it's what we call a second home for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's true.
So we need to be there in some capacity. So now we're doing that as well.
And so the Catalyst Fund, one of its missions is to help support Endeavor.
Exactly.
And so how does that work? I mean, who are the LPs?
Okay.
Where did the money,
So most of the LPs are exited Endeavor entrepreneurs, are Endeavor board members, friends of Endeavor, and mostly high net worth individuals, I would say. The idea is our LPs get their carry and the organization gets part of the carry so that whatever the organization gets is used for the development of the organization. And our as local offices, we get carry as well. Okay. So there's a big equation where we also raise funds for the fund and from every local ecosystem, and whenever, even if there's an exit in Uruguay, Endeavor Turkey office gets something out of it. So we're very much motivated to help each other out because it really benefits the whole organization when there's an exit.
It's been very, very successful from what I've heard.
So it has been successful. So, I mean, unicorns, they're like one of the indicators. So there's America and China and the rest of the world when you look at the unicorn counts. So outside of the big unicorn producing markets, Endeavor Catalyst is the third largest fund in terms of the number of unicorns in the world. Wow. We also have some amazing companies that have made really great exits, such as Peak Games from Turkey. So the Turkish portfolio is also amazing. And looking from an exits point of view, Turkey has become the best performing Endeavor market in Catalyst. So we have Yemek Sepeti, Peak Games.
Wow, you're in all the big ones,
Foriba, EasyCo. We're also invested in Insider, Picus Securities, etc., which are going to be amazing exits. And so our Turkish portfolio is very strong. So take this and multiply it by 40. That's the strength of this portfolio.
It brings the question to my mind. It's super successful. You could think a lot of investors might say, hey, I would love to invest in a fund like that. So not just to benefit Endeavor, but also...
Exactly. So we do that. I mean, part of the motivation for the LPs is commercial. Uh-huh. The only thing that's different from a traditional VC fund is the instead of the 20-80 carry structure, we have a 50-50 carry structure. So our LPs are donating a bit of their carry to the organization. But when we make the calculations, even like with this 50-50 structure on a net basis, it's still a top performing fund. Okay. And we've kept the fund size quite similar from fund to fund. And we deploy quite fast. There's a time when we're making like one investment a week because like if the ecosystem is hot and a lot of deals are being made, then we're like the map is lighting up at all around the world. So it is for the LPs. Our main aim is to give them a good return. Okay. And in terms of the fund size, I mean, I don't know how big it's gonna get with the 6th, 7th, 8th fund, etc. Because the funding requirements of our entrepreneurs are increasing. So but what what's really special is all of us working on the field. So there's 600 employees of Endeavor. We're all on the ground in these countries looking for the best entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And then we have amazing boards in all of our offices, which means our board members are sort of and our mentors.
So there's a network beyond just the 600 employees. There's also all the board members. Our
community is picking the best ones, sending them to the international selection panel.
So it's a really unique model.
It's a very unique model.
Opportunities for access that other VC funds don't have. So I wanted to switch a bit. We talked already a bunch about the Turkish ecosystem. We talked about how a lot of people came in 2006, 2007. We talked about a lot of the successes. How do you see the ecosystem now? Where do you see it's at? Where do you see it going towards? And are there any kind of key challenges you see with the Turkish startup and venture ecosystem currently?
So, I think Turkey is an interesting beast, right? Because we have a lot of things going for us in terms of compared to Europe, this young population, even though this discourse is getting a little bit old, pun intended, we are getting old. There's a lot of energy, amazing, engineering talent, etc. But on the flip side, we haven't been super strong in creating worldwide companies. Part of it, I think, has to do with, if you're a Turkish entrepreneur, you don't have a very clear next market, Mm-hmm. If you're in LATAM, the Spanish-speaking LATAM is basically one market.
Right.
Brazil is huge anyway.
Right.
And now from Brazil, if you want to go to Europe, you soft land in Portugal. Or if from LATAM, you soft land in Miami and then Madrid. Or if you're in Jordan, which is a small country, but you have all of Saudi because of the same language, We don't have any, no other country almost in the world speaks our language.
Right.
We have on our west, yes, we have an amazing market, but there's EU considerations and everything. And then, so it's tricky to form a company out of here.
They say in French, l'embarras du choix. There's so much to choose from actually that it makes it, there's not one obvious market. So it becomes difficult to choose where to go and what's the right decision.
And so it's no wonder, I think, that gaming became sort of one of the anchor industries out of here because we have the role models, the peaks, etc., who started early and made a great exit and also invested in people. So they created the talent. And then gaming is great because you can sit in Istanbul and create a worldwide business. And you have an amazing test bed in Turkey with the people who love playing games and everything. And that's how sort of that ecosystem, it's now if you go to any investor in the world that knows just a little bit about casual gaming, if you tell them you're a game studio from Turkey, they'll be like, oh, okay, let's, I hear a lot of things about Turkey. Let's sit down and talk about it. The same thing doesn't happen in AI, of course, for example, but gaming, we're sort of on the map.
So are there other industries that have the same dynamic? The obvious one is non-gaming apps.
Exactly, non-gaming apps.
We're seeing those
Coldway
developing in Turkey.
And they were creating sort of AI apps before we were talking so passionately about them. And now we're seeing a lot of Coldway-like companies that are coming. Again, there's now Turkish entrepreneurs know how to create an app, which is not the most important thing, but they also know how to distribute it. And they know how to manage the finances. It's at the end, it's a math game, and they know how to build, how to kill, what to look for, how to realize if something is becoming viral or not. So the app industry is another one for sure. And then we have in every emerging market, when we look at every Endeavor country, fintech obviously is very big. And because fintech companies, I think if you have a big enough market, you can be very big in fintech, even if you don't go out of Turkey or, whatever market you're in. So Turkish market is big enough, I think, to create very, very strong fintech companies, even though we have very strong banks. Some of the fintech world, in Africa, in Indonesia, Bangladesh, whatever, they have a different twist. It's about access, unbanked, uncreditable. Turkey is a little bit different, but also very strong fintech companies. And there's the commerce aspect, which is selling things to people, basically. So Turkey, we've had some very strong companies in there, like Yemek Sepeti's, etc. And then, of course, Trendyol. We have a very strong e-commerce sort of backbone. And then we have the B2B software world, which is the insiders, the public securities, the SaaS businesses, AI businesses, anything that has to do with software. And that was sort of like the last frontier of the third generation of Turkish entrepreneurs, I would say. And we're getting much better at that as well. So insider is the role model. So the challenge is there are many ways to go outside of Turkey when you're selling a software product. Are you selling to enterprise? Are you selling to mid-market? Do you have to build a team in every country that you want to sell in, sort of like the insider model? Or can you do everything out of wherever? Are you going to sell through partners? Are you going to sell direct? And these are all, they change from company to company. So a lot of Turkish B2B software companies are sort of still in the trial and error phase. Where that really, I think, becomes challenging is you need money to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because what does money buy you? Money buys you time and money buys you options. If you don't have money, you have, let's say, one shot to try. And you have to sit and plan and you're like, okay, we're doing Saudi or we're doing America. America always costs a lot more than you think. So companies like Insider, they left America for last. They started from Southeast Asia and moved gradually towards America. So these are things that once we have somebody who has been at Insider, let's say, when they form a company, then they're already 10 steps ahead because they've seen this. They've maybe even led the expansion into 5 countries.
Yeah, I mean, that know-how building up in the ecosystem is key. And it's
key.
It's not just technical talent, right? It's having built a sales organization in a foreign country, working on go-to-market. All those things are key.
And then, so we have, and I'm sure you touched on this with Bülent and Mina as well, the very strong and getting stronger every day diaspora community. So what are they doing? There's 2 sort of personas. One is the Turkish entrepreneur who sort of like built the company here, but then moved to the market, wherever they're selling, wherever their market is. And then there are the ones that mostly these are in America, some in England, who maybe went to college there, started working for some like the tech companies, and then built their own business natively in the United States or wherever. And a lot of them still have relationships, very strong relationships with Turkey. Some of them employ engineers in Turkey. And this is a new phenomenon because our diaspora is kind of young, like remember, just 20 years ago, we were coming back. And in the past 20 years, a lot of people left Turkey. And now when somebody, the ones that graduate from college or that have like started their career there, they don't really want to come back just now. So that's disappointing in other ways. But the strong diaspora maybe in the future will be our biggest strength.
And in a sense, that kind of going back and forth also helps strengthen.
Absolutely. Because when you have a young entrepreneur in Turkey, or now, they graduated from college, they worked for a couple of years, they've decided to form a company, they will know people in every single market. So they can call up a friend and say, hey, I'm thinking about expanding into Dubai. Like, can you tell me a little bit? Like, if I come, like, let's have a coffee. Like, these connections.
Very important.
When you look at, there's a research called Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and they sort of like map ecosystems based on a couple criteria. And one of the criteria they look at are how interconnected are the entrepreneurs? How strong are the connections? And that's really, really key. Because if you don't know anybody in Dubai, how are you going to sell a product in Dubai, you know? Or if you need to move there, who do you have your first cup of coffee with?
Sure. Even just the social connection helps.
Exactly. So Endeavor then also becomes, we're hoping, to be sort of like that first door that our entrepreneurs knock when they go to a new country as well.
So I want to ask about another development fairly recently in Turkey, which is the local kind of Turkish VC ecosystem. Have you seen that play a role?
Absolutely. So my work in this ecosystem is almost a little bit older than the oldest VC. So we all started together. And for example, I met Ali and Numan. They were raising for 212. They were trying to tell people we're raising a VC fund, and everybody's like, we don't know what that is. So they're trying to educate people about this asset class and trying to convince people that this is something that Turkey actually has a shot in and that we can have, these companies. Fast forward, they're raising their third fund. Our ecosystem, despite everything, has come a long way. I think our VCs are very seasoned now because they've gone through multiple cycles and really, we've sort of like created this ecosystem together, like they first created the ecosystem and sort of invested in it. And lately, so this is very like the LPGP sort of American style funds that we're talking about. There are like, 5 or 6 of them. And then there's the GSAFs, the smaller funds we now have, I think, more than 150 of them. By deal count, we were the most active early stage investment country in Europe.
Okay.
But early stage.
Okay.
When we go into later stage, the numbers are...
Drop dramatically, right?
Dramatically.
There's a gap for Series A, Series B.
When I look at the numbers, there were, I think, close to 250 early stage deals in 2024. And graduation rate of Turkish companies are actually quite strong because people don't become entrepreneurs easily. They already have so much on the line. They know how to do a lot with scarce resources. So those 200s, they're the future Series A, Series B companies. So provided they find the funding, they will. That means we have a strong cohort coming up. Now, in terms of funding, in 2024, I have the numbers, a little bit more than $1 billion in VC funding.
Yep.
But when you take out like insider, like 500 of them is insider. A couple of big rounds make up for a huge number, which is typical, of course. But what we need is more $10 million exits, $50 million exits.
Okay, interesting.
So yes, unicorns are great, decacorns are great, but in order to create a lot of action and activity, and we do really believe in second-time founders. So if you can get the first-time founders, some of them will go on to be decacorns, some of them will go on to be unicorns, but
even the small exits help grow the ecosystem.
I mean, can you imagine when you were starting out in your 20s? And you build a strong product, which may not be $1 billion business, but it's a great product for another company. And if you do a great, a sensible exit and you have $5 million in your pocket, and think about like how much fuel that gives you in creating your next company. So, and they become angel investors. Right. And that's also starting to happen a little bit. I mean, we have some early stage exits happening. And then our Series A funds are growing their fund size with every fund. Right. So now we have people raising, like they started with 30, now they're raising 100, 150. What we're missing is a real growth stage fund, but those tend to be regional or international. At that stage, the companies are also quite global.
So it would be great to have local VCs that can fund Series A, Series B, but you can also pull in international VCs at that point because you're probably going to be going global at that point.
And what we believe is one of the things we try to do is to create opportunities for the VCs of Endeavor countries to know each other. Because when a Series B VC is investing into Turkey, their chances of investing are a lot higher if they already know the Series A VCs. So if GA knows 212 already.
Right. I wanted to ask about that actually, because the Catalyst Fund helps fund Endeavor. It also helps support the entrepreneurs. Similarly, since the VCs are part of the ecosystem and help grow the ecosystem, is it something you've ever discussed or thought about having kind of a fund-to-fund approach, or having Catalyst also invest in local funds?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of money, but
you need more money to.
Yeah.
I mean you can have fairly small fund-to-funds too, but
so we always talk about how does it make sense to have mini catalysts in our countries that will co-invest with local funds. So we go back and forth. In some markets, it might be sensible. In some, maybe there's not enough depth. But and maybe in our next fund, who knows what we're talking about. But it's really interesting. And now that we look at how some of the wealthier countries, for example, are creating ecosystems through fund of funds, they're trying to seed a lot of funds in their own countries so that they can start sort of an activity or entice global funds to come and open up offices.
And Turkey created a fund of fund as well, right? We have a sovereign
wealth fund as well, and they're now seeding some VCs. They're quite active. It takes many players, so the government is crucial for money, but also the regulation aspect. The existing entrepreneurs are crucial because they're sort of the ones that make they were there before everybody. And so what's also interesting, of course, is first there's always the entrepreneur who's doing something against all odds,
Right.
And then everybody else, they're a lagging indicator. You know, the money comes after. They're like, oh, there's something there, so let me go to Turkey. And we've seen this, like when you start using the same words, you're talking about the same sort of shared vision, then it's like I've seen our public leaders sort of redefine entrepreneurship now in the way that we've been defining it, you know, like we're talking about. And of course, Turkey has this like defense sector and all the other things that like we're not very close to, but they also are very, very important, not just for the brand of Turkey. They're important for creating a lot of engineering jobs. And those engineers, like a lot of technologies that are created for defense that end up being commercialized for other things anyway. And it's something that everybody can get behind.
Right.
So it ends up also being, I think, uniting the whole country because the success stories and the effect that a strong entrepreneur has on his or her immediate and not so immediate environment is quite profound.
So I mean, I think it's really interesting to see the local VC ecosystem growing also. And we're talking about government. The government putting in place a legal framework for that has been useful. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's still evolving.
We have a law that, and you guys are probably subject to this at Turknet, so you can talk a little bit even better about it. If you're getting money for R&D from the government,
3% of the tax incentives you get for R&D, you have to invest back into the local VC structures. So there's good incentives to kind of to make it happen. That
created many CVCs because a lot of companies created their own little funds, or some of them invested in other funds. Now, of course, a lot of these won't be successful. Some of them will be, but what's important is that there's fuel, for entrepreneurs to try to make mistakes.
So I'm curious to see in the future the interactions between Endeavor and the local VCs.
I'm hoping that the story we tell helps our VCs raise funds as well. Endeavor puts a lot of emphasis on Turkey just because our first investments did so well.
Right.
We watched a lot of people leave. Like we watched our co-investors do fire sales and like leave the companies, but we're in it for the long haul, of course. So, and it paid off for us.
Right.
And that's a very strong indicator of the resilience of the Turkish entrepreneurs and the strong strength of the market. And along with us, some of our Turkish VC friends made a lot of great returns as well. And they have some great pipeline. So we're hoping that the story that we keep telling will just not for Turkey, but all of our 40 countries. We're hoping that this is going to also help every VC when they're raising funds.
Those ecosystems. Very cool. We are reaching the end of our time, so I wanted to switch to a couple kind of rapid fire questions. Yeah. Is there something you see in the market that you believe in, but that interestingly other people don't seem to see?
So I think we're not early stage enough to be making I don't think the bets we're making are contrarian at all at when we're selecting the Endeavor entrepreneurs. But I go back and forth a lot about this local versus global approach. I think when the country is going through a lot of challenges, the instinct of the investment community is obviously to not put all the eggs in one basket. So we had a big shift in the Turkish VC ecosystem from B2C to B2B because B2C companies tend to be local and really only trying to support companies that have a global edge, But what we're seeing in fintech, for example, is that you can still, there is still a lot of local businesses that can be built. So maybe traditional venture is not the best way to look at this because maybe the 20x, 10x, 100x approach, but there is funding that needs to go to local companies as well.
Sure.
So that'll be interesting how we figure that out as an ecosystem.
Yep, that's great. Is there kind of a typical mistake you see with the startups that you evaluate for Endeavor?
So from an earlier stage, we see that, and I think this is quite typical, entrepreneurs are very much into the product, not quite the distribution part.
Right.
And I think that's part of why B2C is getting a little scary because eyeballs are getting very, very expensive. So that's when you need a really seasoned entrepreneur to navigate that world. For example, when you look at a Codeway and look at the everybody's trying to get in front of that person, you know?
Right.
And it's the same with gaming. So analytical and creative and strategy has to work together. So we find that when one leg of that stool is broken, that kind of, that's a problem. In the B2B, I find sometimes entrepreneurs are not realistic about the amount of money that they need to spend in order to enter a market. Again, especially for America, especially for enterprise in America. I mean, it's so expensive. And I think sometimes in B2B, again, people are not super realistic about the sales cycles. So everything ends up being a little bit slower than what people have anticipated. Yep. So sometimes the capital is not enough to...
That's why you really need the VC funding to
exactly
expand into new markets. Last one, is there a shout out you'd want to make to another person or organization?
So our board of directors is amazing. I mean, there's many of them.
You want to mention?
So Emre Kurttepeli is our chairman, founder of MyNet. So he was one of the first technology founders in Turkey, and MyNet was too old to become an Endeavor entrepreneur, so we never had that relationship. But his footprint is huge because of his investments in many entrepreneurs, in funds, the people that have left MyNet to become entrepreneurs. So he's been leading Endeavor for 6 years now. And our whole board, part of whom are entrepreneurs. So Fırat, Nevzat, Hande, Koray, Zafer from OBSS, they're all our board members, and they're amazing. And our amazing entrepreneurs. The stories that are coming out are unbelievable. And it's such a privilege to walk with them. You know, like our job is to be super enthusiastic and active cheerleaders. The day-to-day life of an entrepreneur is very difficult, especially one that's creating the next, Turkish billion-dollar company. And I have a lot of respect for everybody who's on this journey.
Privilege to get to be working with them.
Unbelievable privilege.
So that's part of the fun. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for joining. And I'm excited to see what transpires in the next 5-10 years with Endeavor and with the Turkish ecosystem.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see together, huh?
Yep. And maybe do another episode in the future.
Let's do it.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Turkish VC podcast. My name is Yunus Çelebi. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and tell your friends. You can listen to more episodes wherever you find podcasts on Spotify or YouTube, etc. Stay tuned for further episodes.